On January 8, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared war on poverty. This was in response to a national poverty rate of 19%. From there, he created federal programs through the Office of Economic Opportunity. These programs aimed at eliminating poverty by improving the living conditions of the residents of low-income neighborhoods. As of year 2021, the overall poverty rate in the U.S. has fallen to 9.2%. Yet despite this improvement, poverty has been far more persistent among America's racial subgroups. Currently, the poverty rate among Black and Latino Americans sit at 15% and 13% respectively, more than double the 6.6% poverty rate among white Americans. So for all the brilliant minds that have attempted to address the issue of equitable growth, the solution continues to elude underserved minorities despite the fact that they are America's fastest growing segment of population. So as the population continues to become more diverse, there is increasing pressure to debunk the myth of equitable growth and finally achieve the society that we've all been promised. And while I don't claim to have all the answers, I do have several suggestions rooted in the democratic principles of self-determination and access. First, we must define what equitable growth actually means. The concept has been around since the 1930s, but has never been universally embraced. On one hand, underserved minority groups seek to end systemic racism in capitalism. On the other hand, upper-class Americans seek to minimize tax rates and social welfare programs to preserve generational wealth. Both sides claim that their perspective is consistent with the tenets of American exceptionalism. And both sides are correct. Common to each perspective is a desire for self-determination, which I believe is key to establishing an equitable economy. We must make certain that every American, regardless of race, is financially literate with a firm understanding of economics, investment, and commerce, so that they may be able to define what wealth means for themselves, as well as their community. Yet history has proven that there is no self-determination without access to capital and business opportunities. To empower underserved minorities, we must create a platform for inclusive resource allocation that marries financial outcome to socioeconomic benefits. And while I am not advocating for a redistribution of wealth, I am emphatically advocating for the full distribution of the opportunities to gain wealth. For every subsidy program or corporate bailout plan, our leaders must identify who is to benefit and vigorously track the impact of each investment. Bank bailouts, payroll protection plans, opportunity zone benefits must create measurable wealth for low-income census tracts consistent with the profits collected by participating companies. Failure to meet social economic goals should automatically trigger subsidy recapture in the same way that the IRS collects back taxes. Alternatively, corporations that reject government interventions should be allowed to abstain from diversity, equity, and inclusion programs so as to protect free market principles while preserving subsidies for private entities that are willing to invest for social impact. Economic accountability should also extend to government entities. Federal, state, and municipal institutions must rise to the challenge of providing better customer service to underrepresented minorities. Even the best public policies will have no impact on the lives of low-income Americans if the people responsible for delivering these promises are unprofessional. The inconvenient truth is that equitable growth strategies are only as good as the people responsible for making them a reality. Just imagine going through a McDonald's drive-thru, hoping to receive fast food in short order. You wait 20 minutes for your food, only to discover that your burgers are missing and the staff forgot to put straws in your bag for your drinks. Now you're hungry and frustrated, but your complaints to McDonald's management are met with judgment as they ridicule you for buying fast food, despite the fact that that's all you could afford. Such is the life for low-income families in America. Poor people are often demonized for seeking government assistance that they rarely receive without hassle. There are plenty of reports of people being charged for PPP loan fraud, but no reports of anyone being fired for administering a program where minority and women receive less than 12% of a $15 billion government loan initiative. This vicious cycle of victim blaming has perpetuated systemic racism in our economy since 1776. Blaming poor people for their own failures is America's oldest alibi for robbing self-determined minorities of their right to economic mobility. Nevertheless, there's an obvious solution to providing better access to underrepresented communities. Give women and minorities capital allocation authority at all levels and tie their performance to inclusive economic investments. Whether we're talking about executive leadership, public board administration, or corporate boards, the only proven way that women and minorities will consistently gain access to the tools necessary to gain wealth is through power sharing. And if an organization is government related, tax exempt, or receives any funding from government, power sharing among women and minorities should be mandatory, not optional. I started my tenure as CEO of Invest Newark in February 2019. 2 years later, my company converted Section 8 renters into first-time home buyers through partnerships with minority developers. The Section 8 home ownership conversion program has actually been around since the 1970s. Yet it took 50 years to provide home ownership opportunities to Section 8 residents through work with minority and women developers. So what made Invest Newark any different? Well, first and foremost, my staff prioritizes economic mobility of low-income families. Secondly, my staff is as diverse as it is in talent. And it's through this diverse leadership that these families will own their own home in 15 years, free and clear of debt, which cannot be said for many of the people that have long criticized their beautiful economic struggle. In conclusion, everyone has the ability to own a home or start a business. But without a willingness to tie racial reconciliation to self-determination and access, America will continue to promote the myth of equality while punishing the victims of economic racism. It's time to define clear metrics for creating wealth in underserved communities. We must ensure that people making capital allocation decisions look like people in need of impact investments. We must hold all economic actors to performance directly tied to success of low-income communities. And finally, government employees must hold themselves to professional service standards that create economic growth beyond the privileged few. It is at this level of self-determination and access that America will debunk the myth of equitable growth and finally achieve the society that we've all been promised.